Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas.
Hi, and welcome to this special edition of Out to Lunch Louisiana. I'm Peter Ricchiuti in New Orleans.
I'm Stephanie Riegel in Baton Rouge.
And I'm Christiaan Mader in Lafayette.
Normally, we're the hosts of Out to Lunch in our respective cities, but during the course of this current public health crisis, we're joining forces to bring you a statewide look at what's happening in the world of business and finance.
We're sharing this current crisis with the rest of the country and much of the world. So some of what we're going to look at is big picture stuff to try and make sense of what is going on globally and nationally. But we're mostly going to focus on how this current health crisis affects our local economy and our personal finances here at home.
Normally, we're very conscious of the differences between our three areas of the state, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Acadiana. But we're going through this crisis together, and I think you're going to find that as we explore the challenges facing us, at least for right now, we have more in common than separates us.
One of the things we have in common is none of us are actually out to lunch. We're all quarantined in our respective homes or offices. Normally, I'd be hosting Out to Lunch New Orleans at Commander's Palace. While Commander's is closed for dining, they're doing pickup and delivery. Their pickup and delivery menu changes daily, and you can find out what's available by going to their website, commanderspalace.com.
In Baton Rouge, our regular Out to Lunch restaurant, Mansur's on the Boulevard, is doing pickup and delivery. You can get a number of Mansur's signature dishes. Your favorite one is probably available. The best way to enjoy a meal from Mansur's is to give them a call. Their number is 225-923-3366, 225-923-3366.
In Lafayette, the restaurant that hosts us for Out to Lunch Acadiana, the French Press, is doing curbside takeout. And you can also get meals delivered directly from the restaurant or through Waiter and Grubhub. The French Press now has a family dinner menu, and you can reach them at 337-233-9449. That's 337-233-9449.
Now, we often hear the era we're living in right now is described as uncharted waters. That term comes from people who navigate the seas using charts, basically maps of the ocean with known impediments to sailing, like reefs. While it's true that most of us have never lived through a worldwide pandemic, we have lived through the ups and downs of the stock market. Some of us are old enough to have been through more than one of these swings. The only thing we always say when the market sinks is, if you hold on, everything will be okay. The market will go back up. But the cause of this global financial crisis is something none of us have experienced, a global health crisis. So are we, in fact, in truly uncharted waters and where the old rules might not apply? To answer this question, let's turn to Ricardo Thomas. Ricardo is with the financial consultancy firm Thomas Waddell & Associates in New Orleans. Ricardo, here's the multi-billion-dollar question. Is it all going to be okay this time if we just hold on? Or is there something different going on here?
Well, Peter, I think given everything that's going on, there's a tendency to panic and wonder, will things return to normal? But the reality is, while the coronavirus is different, we have in the past dealt with various other health viruses and so forth. So I do believe that things will return to normal. It's just a matter of time.
Well, what do you view this as? Is it a major turning point on how people view stocks in general? For instance, Ricardo, my parents grew up in the Depression, and we, of course, never talked about stocks or anything like that at the dinner table. Does this change things forever?
I don't think it does at all. I mean, we're living in a time now where all of us are being asked to be more responsible for our retirement planning. To the point of your parents, they probably grew up with the old defined benefit pension plans, on the job. Now we're living in the era where most folks have the 401ks, where you're having to make the investment decisions as to how those monthly dollars are allocated, or even the allocation of the dollars that your particular employer may set aside for you. So it really causes us to be more engaged and involved, but it's a matter of having proper information and not panicking, especially in times like this. Emotion usually causes us to make rash decisions right now that end up coming back to haunt us in the long term.
Sometimes you've heard it said that the best decision is no decision in a situation like that. Is that one of the things you're telling
Absolutely.
clients?
One of the things, I mean, obviously we're prone to staying close to our TVs and radios right now to get current information on the virus. But at the same time as we're getting information on the virus and how to properly cope, we're inundated with a lot of information as to what's going on in the stock market. And because of that, in and of itself, it will cause people to pay more attention and possibly panic because they really don't understand everything that's going on. When in reality, right now, given how far the market has gone down, it's really kind of too late to do anything now. So it's a matter of riding out the storm, or if there are dollars available in cash, taking advantage of some of the bargains in good companies that are available out there right now.
And that's what I was going to ask you, Ricardo. I mean, what is it that drives people to start buying at this level?
Well, the thing is, again, is making sure they stick to their investment fundamentals. Investing, which is quite different from speculating. We can go down the street in New Orleans on Poydras to speculate. It's called the casino. But investing really requires a long-term strategy. And we're talking about 4 to 5 years or longer. So that being the case, even right now, you have to stick to those fundamentals, take emotion out of the equation, but also still adhering to the proper selection process as it relates to the type of assets that you put into your portfolio. So whether you're using individual stocks or bonds, or even the different types of mutual funds and so forth, those same principles that applied 30 days ago still apply today.
Are there any red flags, Ricardo, that we should be looking for? And is there any level that the market could go to that you would say, okay, wait a minute, this isn't the same kind of system that we've known and been able to apply these rules of rationality to all along?
Stephanie, that's a good question. And the reality is right now, given how far the market has already come, and also looking at the volatility and the volume of what's going on in the market right now, really you're starting to see a bit of a sea change where folks, the smart money, as I like to call it, has already started looking for bargains and opportunities to go out and rebuild their portfolios. So for the average person, really, if you're in mutual funds or if you employed or deployed proper investment strategies beforehand, it's literally right now just riding it out. There's really no safe haven, if you will, to run to at this point. I mean, the damage is done, and as I was telling a client yesterday, if all of industry and all of the companies go out of business anyway, what are you going to need money for? Where are you going to use it? So it's really a situation of just riding it out. And most importantly, I'll add, is if we look to history as for guidance, if you will, history has shown that industry is at the top of the totem pole. I mean, when we look at the response from government and so forth, it's always about getting these companies back running and operating because we need their goods and services, but we also need them for employment. And so when we look at that, and especially here, given that we are in New Orleans and we came through Hurricane Katrina, we know the number one mandate was getting companies and businesses back up and running, which included the Superdome, which really changed the tide as it relates to recovery. So that's the thing we have to look at. As long as we realize that companies are in business to make money, then all we have to do is follow that trend and invest wisely.
So what I'm curious about is what in your mind is actually going to be the pivot point where the markets respond positively? Is it going to be when, the Congress gets its act together and puts a stimulus package into place? Is it going to be whenever the U.S. or Louisiana or whatever, kind of stops producing the same number of cases on a basis? I mean, what is the market actually going to respond to in terms of positive news that would give, folks who have money tied up there, especially, nearing retirement, the belief that things are actually moving in the right direction?
Well, I'll say all of the above. So let's start with the last question first. Well, when you said for individuals who are close to retirement, the reality is the closer you are to retirement, the more you should be shifting automatically your portfolio to be more conservative, because you're going from a growth mode to now what I like to call a harvest or an income mode. So that should have been going on pre this pandemic anyway. But as to your other points, as it relates to Congress and the stimulus, even with this morning, right now, the market is up quite a bit in response, in hopes that Congress gets its act together and they can come together in agreement to get something done. And so just the idea of them working together with a plan has already netted positive effects on the market. But then looking at it more on a statewide level, as we get more testing and as there is more certainty, I think that's the key. When you look at what has really impacted the market as a whole, the market historically likes certainty. And what this virus brought in, given that it was an unknown, and so many things we didn't know about it, there was this knee-jerk reaction as to, I don't know what's going on, so there's this flight to safety. But as we get more testing, as we get more aware of the symptoms, and most importantly, eventually come up with some type of a vaccine or what have you, then that's going to instill confidence for folks to get off of the sidelines and get back out in the market. But the reality is, the last point I mentioned, from a retirement standpoint, when you're looking at least 5 years out or more, nothing has changed. I mean, the reality is history has shown that there have always been bumps in the road. We can go all the way back to Black Friday in 1987, to the dot-com bubble in 2000, to 9/11 in 2001, to the mortgage and bank crisis in 2008, and all the various different things that have gone on in between. And so that number one tells us is that there is no perfect road. There is no perfect, upside. It's not going to always be peaches and cream. So as long as we stick to our fundamentals and having a good game plan, we should be fine.
And Ricardo, one of the things that makes us look a little different is people are talking about the recession being more severe and maybe shorter, or at least it's sort of appearing that that's the way it might be now. What do you tell people that are thinking, oh, I'm going to time the market, I'm going to get in just at the bottom there? Is that kind of a fool's errand?
There is no perfect market timing. There are different steps and strategies, such as dollar cost averaging, that is very prudent at times like this, when you can take advantage of the cheaper prices of various different stocks or even mutual funds. But as far as anyone trying to guess the market in those perfect times, I'll put it this way. As successful as Warren Buffett has been for so many years, he still hasn't been able to perfectly time the market. So if Buffett can't do it, none of the rest of us can.
And one last thing, Ricardo, I think of 08, 09, and one of the things I remember that was so difficult is when people got out, they never got back in, and they missed really a tremendous 11-year rally. How do you deal with that with clients?
You are absolutely right. And that really goes back to my first point of taking the emotion out of it. Because you're right, back in 2008 and 2009, it's because of the emotion and really the lack of knowledge of understanding how the market works that caused people to make decisions that they could not recover from, because, as you said, they stayed on the sideline, never got back in, and they missed out on this great bull run that we've had. So my job really has been talking folks off the ledge, if you will, and utilizing history as a guide and saying, remember what happened in 2008 and 2009, and just reminding them of the old adage of the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We can't make the same mistakes that we made in 2008 as far as, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and not getting back or staying in the market.
And they don't ring a bell when it's time to get back in.
Right, exactly.
Ricardo Thomas is a financial consultant of Thomas Waddell and Associates in New Orleans. Ricardo, thanks so much for joining us on Out to Lunch, Louisiana.
And thank you for having me.
You're listening to a special edition of Out to Lunch, Louisiana with Peter Ricchiuti in New Orleans, Christiaan Mader in Lafayette, and I'm Stephanie Riegel here in Baton Rouge. One thing you don't need us to tell you is that we're living through a public health crisis. It's difficult for all of us dealing with the disruption to our lives, But imagine how much more difficult life has suddenly gotten for people in the healthcare sector. Mike Bertaut is a healthcare economist at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana, based in Baton Rouge. Mike has been in this position for more than 15 years, and that experience has elevated him to the status of a recognized national authority on healthcare and healthcare reform. Mike, 1.6 million people in Louisiana have their health insurance with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So let's start with the obvious and most important question. If I'm one of those 1.6 million people and I contract COVID-19, am I covered by any special federal provision, or am I paying the standard copay according to whatever personal health plan I have?
Yes, Stephanie, absolutely. The first thing you need to know is when you go to get tested for COVID-19, there's not going to be any of the normal hurdles you might run across, no prior authorizations. We won't charge a copay or a coinsurance or a deductible if you need to get tested for COVID-19. We're going to take a hard look at the diagnostic tests because we want people as much as possible to follow the guidance of the Centers for Disease Control, because we think that establishing that standard throughout the industry will give us our best chance of understanding what the disease is, how it spreads, and exactly what the most effective courses of treatment are. In addition to that, if you don't know if you're affected by COVID, but you're a Blue Cross member who has a prescription maintenance medication for blood pressure or cholesterol, please make sure you're getting your scripts refilled. Stick with it. If you need to go early and get them refilled, we're not going to say, oh, it's not long enough. Just go ahead and get it done, and we'll take care of the timing issues right away.
Mike, we've seen so many dire predictions about the curve of this disease and everything. Have y'all modeled out what the dollar impact is going to be on the healthcare sector and on the health insurance industry? How much is this going to ultimately cost us?
Well, there's no doubt that it's going to have an accelerated impact on the way we spend money. Blue Cross in Louisiana, we're a not-for-profit, so the market going up and down affects our clients a lot, but it doesn't affect us as much. We have spent a lot of time, especially since Hurricane Katrina, building up a strong rainy day fund. And believe me, it's pouring down rain right now, even if you can't see it. So we feel very confident in our ability to continue to pay claims. On a normal day, on a normal month, we're putting about $300 million into the Louisiana healthcare economy. I don't expect that to go down, certainly. But, there's going to be a balance. I've noticed that a lot of people who were scheduling maybe not as critical medical care are putting that aside right now, maybe waiting a little while to make room for this new disease state and the new people coming through. And so I'm not looking for gigantic jumps in the spending right away, but we will monitor that very carefully. My job, in fact, will be to forecast that based on people coming in and out of their insurance as data becomes available over the next few weeks.
I'm curious, one thing that I heard about today was that we're seeing a lot of folks that are, losing their jobs, some of them hopefully temporarily, and with that, medical benefits, healthcare insurance. So, how do you expect this to impact the healthcare system generally? If people start moving on to government plans, if they're moving out of private insured plans, what's going to happen?
Yeah, those are great questions. We've managed to build a healthcare system that can't really exist without third-party payers. If you don't have a third party backing you up and you have a serious illness, you're in bad shape, let's face it. So what we've built, and really a lot of this falls on the ACA, on the Affordable Care Act, we've got a continuum of health insurance that you can access very easily. The main thing is, if you lose coverage at work because your hours get cut or you lose your job, don't panic. The Affordable Care Act is there, and losing your coverage at work is an automatic open enrollment trigger for healthcare.gov. So anyone who loses their employer-based coverage, if they don't want to buy COBRA when they're released, of course, you have access to your employer's based coverage for the first 18 months you're out of your job. COBRA can be expensive because your employer is not required to contribute anymore. If that doesn't work for you, you can go to healthcare.gov, and they will screen you based on your expected income for federal help to help you pay your premiums, to help you pay your deductibles, and also they'll screen you for Medicaid. Louisiana is one of the few states in the South that has taken up the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion. That's a huge deal for the citizens in the state today, because it means anybody at 138% of the poverty line or below is eligible for free health insurance through the state. And when you go to healthcare.gov, if your income that you report is low enough, they'll refer you to the Medicaid program.
Mike, our healthcare system was already, I wouldn't say on the brink, but there were already so many questions and problems. Once the dust clears from this, I mean, is this going to be the crisis that sort of pushed us towards a new healthcare payer system? I mean, what do you see looking out long term from this?
I think it's a little early to comment on major changes down the road. A lot of the things that the political campaigns were proffering as solutions, they were a little far-fetched in terms of financing, in terms of actually working in a situation like the U.S. system. But what is going to be very evident is that our system, our hospital system, is going to show up to be much stronger than we expected. And Louisiana is going to be kind of on the cutting edge of that experiment right now. We did have an accelerated rate of cases of COVID here in the state, and we already had more than 50% of our population on public health insurance, either Medicare or Medicaid or the VA, more than half of our citizens. That makes us the only state that had that number. So we're going to be studied really hard when this is over. We're going to be looking very carefully at how public financing of healthcare worked compared to private financing of healthcare. And I'll tell you, when private finances, there's more money going into the system than when the public system finances. And right now, I think we'd all agree we need to keep that money flowing as quickly as possible to hospitals, doctors, clinics, everybody who's taking care of these people.
And Mike, this is kind of a bricks and mortar question, but sometimes I'll talk to a business and they'll say that they expand their capacity, and of course the line is always, you build your church for Easter Sunday. And do you think after this we'll see hospitals expand their capacity?
Well, it depends. If we see recurrences of diseases like this, it wouldn't surprise me. It's worth remembering, though, that the hospital systems here in the state are supported, and they did have a little excess capacity, I think, before this got started. And what's really going to be interesting to watch is the emergence of telehealth as a substitute as we go forward. We've had telehealth systems in place. The uptake hasn't been that strong. But I find that this particular emergency is really driving people to use teledoc, online doc. Our Blue Care, for example, one of the things we do to make it easier for our 1.6 million members is we took the copays off of using teledoc. And so now we know we've seen this big uptick in traffic. In fact, a lot of hospitals around the state have their own version of the teledoc system, and you can use theirs. If you use ours, the copays are zero. You might have to pay a little to use the hospital or the clinic's version. But I think I always expected millennials to really jump on the bandwagon and make that go. I think this is going to be the push that gets us older folks to really embrace going to the doc on our tablet or on our smartphone.
There seems to have been a number of public policy changes that have been put in place to try and loosen up access to telehealth. You see a lot of that stuff sticking around?
Well, it's a lot easier to undo something. Once it's done, it's hard to put it back. So I would say if the public gets their hooks into telehealth and it really works for them, it'll go forward really rapidly. The support system that we've put in place to make sure this will work is worth mentioning also. We have about 2,500 employees scattered around the state, and we are fully open for business. We've managed to remote work a huge proportion, like me, of our workforce. And I mean, if we can work from home, then it would make sense that teledoc is really going to take off and become a more important piece. Waiting in a doctor's waiting room is probably not the best use of your time every day of the week, right? So I'm expecting this to continue to grow. And I think that people who want to put more restrictions on it will probably encounter more resistance.
Mike, what is the number one question that you have heard from employers over the past week, as y'all's phones have been ringing off the hook, no doubt? What do they want to know?
Well, employers want to know about paying their bills because when their cash flow is interrupted, they're concerned that our cash flow would be interrupted. And we are essentially, on a normal day, passing through 85% of the money that comes in the door is going right back out to pay somebody's medical bills. So I want to let employers know via this engine that we still need them to pay their premiums. We will put that money to very good use out in the marketplace. And we are talking about negotiating and trying to figure out if there's a long-term option for how to handle scheduling premium payments if people are late or have interruptions in their cash flow. We haven't made any decisions about that yet, and we will announce changes as they become available. But at this time, I'm going to just ask employers to keep submitting premiums on behalf of your employees.
Mike Bertaut is a healthcare economist at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. Mike, thank you so much for joining us on Out to Lunch Louisiana.
Thank you so much for having me, and you guys stay safe.
You're listening to a special edition of Out to Lunch Louisiana with Stephanie Riegel in Baton Rouge, Peter Ricchiuti in New Orleans, and I'm Christiaan Mader in Lafayette. Here in Acadiana, we're no strangers to things going wrong. Most recently, we had the massive floods of August in 2016, which caused major disruptions to both social and business life here in Acadiana. And economically, we are a major player in Louisiana's oil and gas industry, and we've seen more than our fair share of boom and bust cycles. The local chapter of the United Way has had a visible and valuable presence here through all of our recent crises. After years in local government, Carlee Alm-LaBarr took over as president and CEO of United Way Acadiana in February of this year. Carlee, I'm sure when you took over, you had all kinds of plans, and now a few weeks onto the job, we're hit with a pandemic. The price of oil has dipped all the way down to $20 a barrel or something to that effect. From your perspective, what's the immediate impact on all this and on Acadiana?
Well, I think just like across the state, we have people that are really trying to figure out the impact. I think United Way has, as you reference, has a long history in being involved in disasters. And South Louisiana, most of those disasters are either a flood or a hurricane, which are just so different than how we need to respond to a pandemic. So I think one of the first responses that everybody is having is retraining themselves even what a disaster means. And so by that, I mean, we're used to let's cook a big pot of jambalaya or gumbo or whatever, and let's feed everybody who needs to be fed. Well, right now, two things. The peak of this crisis probably hasn't hit from a human services perspective, but also a lot of our traditional responses that kick in as disaster relief, because we're in South Louisiana, are the exact wrong instincts. So we're spending a lot of our time right now re-educating people on what it means to be in a disaster like this. And I think we've even been, of course, reviewing some of our disaster plans and things like that. And, you just, when you've lived in South Louisiana a long time, even when you try to write more broadly, it's your instincts are preparing for flood and hurricane. So it's making sure that we think differently because we're in a pandemic now.
So you said that in a lot of ways, the real crisis in the human services sector hasn't really hit yet. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, I don't think we've seen the peak of the medical emergency as we've heard already on this show. So we expect more sick people in the state. But I also think, we had people who are just starting to lose their jobs. So they're just starting to lose their incomes. The governor closed the schools. I think that was March 13th. And so that was when people's childcare situations really started to change and had different, we're still recovering and figuring out what the food needs are going to look like. And then the stay at home order has also just changed some people's employment. So I think, the income drops that we're going to see and the food needs that we're going to see, those toughest times are ahead of us, not behind us. Same with the medical crisis.
And Carlee, I know in the capital region, for instance, the capital area United Way has struggled as its workforce giving campaign has seen, numbers drop in recent years at a time when the need for the services that the partner agencies United Way funds has gone up. And so this is just going to exacerbate that cycle.
That's exactly right. And I mean, I think that's sort of one of the things that we're keeping an eye on long term. I mean, we see that our job as United Way as, helping the community deal with the most acute needs that are out there. But certainly we have our eye on the ball of keeping our operations up and running. And you're right, workplace giving has declined. And so that becomes even more critical that during this time that we're providing meaningful resources to the community, because long term, this is probably going to take a hit to the sector. Just as an aside, last week, one of the things that we did was hosted a webinar for the nonprofit sector in the Acadiana region to dial in. And we told them, look, 39 hours of the week, 59 hours of the week, whatever it is, you're thinking about your mission and the people you serve. But if you don't spend 1 hour of the week thinking about your organization, you may not be here to serve people in a couple months or, half a year. So we're also trying to, at the same time, keep our eye on that ball as well, because it's clear that over the long haul, our nonprofit sector is going to be needed to help recover.
And Carlee, we talked about workplace giving. You'd mentioned that, and of course, that's probably an issue all over the country. But you're in a particularly difficult situation. The oil industry has been down for 5.5 years. Some people are saying that this most recent decline might be the death knell for some of these companies. And these were not only the best paying jobs, but I imagine they were big contributors to you.
That's exactly right. And that's, it was very clear when I started this job about 3.5 weeks ago, or almost, I think we're somewhere in there. I'm losing count at this point. But it was very clear that I was already in a situation because of the local economy where it was a turnaround position. I came in with some really clear plans on how we were going to do that. And as I think maybe it was Christian that referred to, had to readjust those pretty quickly because we need to respond to this crisis. And, United Way has a long history of being, at the center of helping communities recover and rebuild. And so I expect we'll be there, but there's no doubt that this disaster, both with Louisiana being at the epicenter of the United States outbreak, or one of them, I guess, there's a couple, as well as Lafayette and Acadiana's recent decline economically, in large part because of the oil industry, we're going to have a lot to recover from. We were already, as Christian can share, we were already as a community in a difficult economic time that this is likely to exacerbate. So we certainly are, have our eye on both of those balls.
I mean, do you look? We've seen, even in, say, the newspaper industry, people are furloughing employees. It seems like every week there's a new industry that this touches in a way that we didn't necessarily anticipate, or maybe we should have anticipated it. I mean, are you concerned that some of these nonprofits that you work with, maybe United Way specifically, is going to have to make similarly difficult decisions?
I think that all businesses that are making any kind of payroll are going to have to be looking at that. I mean, I can tell you that in the short to medium term, we don't have plans for that. But I'm sure, one of the other things we did last week was we sent an email out to the entire nonprofit sector, asking them questions if they were feeling comfortable sharing. What's your approximate monthly operating budget? Are you feeling like you can cover that for how long? And what's your employee base? Because, by some estimates, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I think we're about 10% of the economy. And so we're a critical employment resource as well as service provider in the community. And I think just because we're nonprofits doesn't mean we don't also have to look at the business side of our organization. And I think you'll see over time as this crisis goes on that, if the donations struggle to come back because of the economy, you'll see some shifts in the sector because of that. And some of that could eventually be staff cuts or, salary decreases or whatever needs to be done.
Carlee, do you see, looking out a little bit down the road, where maybe this, and it could be something of a silver lining or maybe a more efficient way to operate, but do you see this maybe forcing more collaboration among nonprofits? I mean, I'm just familiar with so many small organizations that were struggling on the best days a month ago, right? And now they're just, I don't know how they're going to make it, but maybe this pushes some smaller organizations to merge, and we have fewer out there, but maybe they're more effective working more closely together.
Having been, having spent about half my career in the nonprofit sector, I can tell you that's a continual theme is are we delivering services as efficiently as possible, and are we using donor resources as well as we could? And I don't doubt, the phrase necessity is the mother of invention. I don't doubt that that's going to come into play in the sector as well. I can tell you, as part of United Way is one of the lead organizations in Acadiana on our local VOAD chapter, which is volunteer organizations active in disaster. And I can tell you right now, we're having about 70 different groups call into morning calls where we talk about coordinating resources. So I am optimistic that we'll be able to take advantage of overlaps in mission and hopefully work together so that we can more efficiently deliver on what our community needs.
You mentioned earlier that this has caused you guys to really even think about how you're dealing with the delivery of the service, right? If you're collecting food, if you're trying to provide and distribute that food. Can you talk to us a little bit about sort of actual logistical challenges that a pandemic, poses when you're trying to deliver essential services to people?
Sure. So I'll give you an example, which we have set up a drive for PPEs, which 3 weeks ago, probably most of us didn't know what that acronym meant, but personal protective equipment for medical folks. And so we've set one up here at our warehouse, which was, procure our warehouses so we can be assisting in disaster. And, we've made it a completely touchless donation system where people can drop off their masks and their gloves that they may have extra of for whatever reason. But we had to rethink. I mean, normally a volunteer drive of where we're collecting supplies, we've got 20 people out here unloading trucks, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is in a time of community spread that's not safe. Same thing with your normal food drives or your normal supply drives. We're having to rethink those. So we're revisiting protocols, and we're talking really closely with the Office of Public Health to make sure anything that we do start up in the way of supplying food to people, that we're doing it so that we do not have community spread after we're done, because that would sort of be the worst case scenario. And everyone's been great, but we have a lot of work to do.
Carlee Alm-LaBarr is president and CEO of United Way of Acadiana. Carlee, thank you so much for joining us and Out to Lunch.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this special edition of Out to Lunch Louisiana. Now, we edited these conversations to fit into the time slot here in your NPR radio station. You can hear the longer versions of these conversations wherever you normally get your Out to Lunch podcast in Acadiana, Baton Rouge, or New Orleans. If you're in New Orleans, remember you can get pickup and delivery from Commander's Palace by going to commanderspalace.com.
In Baton Rouge, you can get pickup and delivery from Mansers on the Boulevard by calling them at 225-923-3366.
In Lafayette, you can pick up and get delivery from the French Press, including their new family dinner, by calling them at 337-233-9449. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical director is Eric Morrell. I'm Christiaan Mader in Lafayette.
I'm Peter Ricchiuti in New Orleans.
And in Baton Rouge, I'm Stephanie Riegel. We'll see you back here next week for more Out to Lunch Louisiana. Until then, if you're an essential industry and still going to work, thank you. And remember to take care of yourself. If you're not going to work, please stay home and stay safe.
Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas.